Greetings, students, and welcome to this special edition of The Professor Travel. I am your host, The Professor Travel, and this is the domestic edition with a focus on Utah. This is the website, the vlog, and the podcast that you go to in order to learn more about different travel destinations. This is where you go in order to discuss them as a community. Hopefully, this will inspire you to travel more and enjoy life more. Now, you can reach me on a variety of different social media platforms, including, of course, my website at theprofessortravel.com. I'm available on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok at The Professor Travel. You can find me on Instagram if you're an Instagrammer at the_professor_travel. If you're a Twitter, then you can find me there at the Professor TR1. And then if you're a blogger, you can find me there at Blogspot at theprofessortravel.blogspot.com. Today, I have the pleasure of reintroducing you, the students, to one of my favorite visiting professors, Morissa Pawl-Frederico. Hello, Morissa. How are you?
Good morning. I'm better. I have a little bit of coffee, so I'm
there.
good.
You go. We're in the same ship, you and I.
Oh yeah.
Now, you and I have recorded several of these podcasts and vlogs together. But for the benefit of those who may have missed one or two, can you talk to us a little bit about your credentials and maybe some places that you've traveled?
You bet. Credentials. Well, I'm a photographer and a professor, a college professor, and I teach international business law. I got into a lot of that because I spent 35 years, or actually 30 years. Let's not add. I spent about 30 years in the travel industry in one way or another. So I've traveled all over the world. I'm an avid traveler. Being confined during COVID is really something that has me on edge.
Yeah. I feel your pain, by the way.
I travel voraciously, about probably internationally about 3 times a year, and I have not been able to go anywhere since last year. I've been all over the world though: Africa, Asia, Southern Asia, down to the Antarctic. Although that was supposed to be my next trip, so that's on hold down within the Antarctic peninsula. But I've just traveled all over the world and I love it. Love traveling.
Excellent. On a side note, since you brought it up, yeah, I mean, like yourself, I'm an avid traveler. This is really, from a psychological point of view, it's been really hard for me this year because I've had to cancel a couple of cruises. But at least like with your frequent flyer miles, I think they're carrying stuff over to the next year. They're extending like
they are. Excuse me. They've carried over my status. Because I have status on the airlines, they've carried over my status. Of course, I don't lose any frequent flyer points. They're trying to give bonuses, whenever they can. And, and my companion tickets, they've extended my companion tickets as well that I get with my credit card. So, which I recommend to everybody to get a credit card with points on an airline that you fly, because it's invaluable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're handling that very well. I flew to Utah after a family matter, and there was no problem. Alaska, and I went on Alaska, who I travel with, and they handled everything beautifully. Everybody wore masks. They spaced people out. I normally get upgraded to first. They didn't, because there wouldn't have been enough spacing. Okay. Which was cool with me. So yeah, they're really doing things the right way, and I had no problem.
Okay, cool. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be talking about Utah in this specific vlog and podcast, and you lived there for a few years, correct?
I did. I lived there for 3 years. I initially went there because I guess I had a midlife crisis, and I rented out my house in California. And I was single, and for the first time in 18 years. And, I decided, I'm going to go visit my dad. My dad and his wife were living in Utah. They had moved there. And I ended up meeting somebody, and, so I lived in Utah for 3 years, and
nice.
Actually got married. And
congrats, by the way.
Thank you. And yeah, 6 years later, I'm in Oregon. So, but I did live there for 3 years, and it was very nice.
So you had an opportunity to not only visit, you had an opportunity to live there. You were immersed in the culture for a little while. So talk to me about what you know about the history of Utah.
Well, the history of Utah is really interesting. I mean, as most people know, that it got its start from the Mormons coming across, leaving Missouri, leaving New York, leaving, what they felt was trouble. I mean, they were being harassed basically, and they ended up in Salt Lake City, excuse me, where Brigham Young stated, "This is the place." That's their saying. And it settled really as a Mormon enclave. It gained statehood in 1896, and one of the conditions of statehood was that they give up the practice of polygamy,
Mhm.
as a condition. So they did. Excuse me. It's still in their Book of Mormon as something that they should be doing. But in order to gain statehood, they put that aside. So they do not practice polygamy. Yes, there are some cults, some sects of offshoots that practice polygamy, but those are frowned upon by the general LDS, Latter Day Saint Church.
And for clarification for my students who aren't really familiar with LDS or the Mormon Church, Brigham Young was not the founder, but he was one of the
No,
prophets. He was one of the first prophets of after John Smith,
Joseph
or
Joseph
not,
Smith. Joseph
or Joseph
Smith
Smith. Joseph Smith.
was
Sorry.
the founder. Excuse me. Joseph Smith was the founder and the first prophet, and Brigham Young was, after Joseph Smith was killed. Brigham Young took the helm.
Okay. Cool. So that was pretty much where we were at, and then I know that uh, Utah got its statehood in 1896.
1896.
And then moving forward from there, what are some of the more recent history that we have that you're familiar with in terms of Utah?
Sure, it's really an interesting modern history, because it started out as a very conservative, state, Mormon state, a religious state, and it very much still is. However, I started going there in 2001 to ski, and incredible skiing. And then the Olympics were in 2002, which I spent the whole time there. And the Olympics really changed the thinking. You could see a complete change and a modernization as far as even Salt Lake City went. um, it used to be, even during the Olympics. Well, first of all, before that, you couldn't even go into the few bars that they were called clubs. You had to be a member. When the Olympics came, they decided, okay, well, you can go in, but you have to be sponsored by a member. And typically, if you were a female, you were in. But typically, it was just a member that was in there that said, "Yeah, I'll sponsor them. Come on in." So it was very lax. Now, of course, everything has changed, and downtown Salt Lake City has a vibrant nightlife with bars and restaurants. But there's still laws that, like, you can't order. If you're in a bar, it's different, but if you're at a restaurant, you cannot order an alcoholic drink without ordering food. You cannot order before 11 a.m.
Mm.
So there are still some holdovers that they're really holding on tightly to, but for the most part, I mean, in the recent history, they've modernized a lot.
And for those who are not familiar, I believe those are called blue laws or something to that extent.
I think they are. I'm not positive on that, but they're very restrictive.
Yeah.
But in downtown Salt Lake City, it's really and it's even changed since I left 5 years ago. When I went back a couple of times, I was in shock. I mean, people, 10, 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, it was just vibrant, and people, having a good time, which was nice to see.
Excellent. Well, we're going to get in talking about the population in just a few minutes, but your expertise and your photography is, I know you do a lot of cultural photography, but you also do a lot of landscape as well. You
I
have
do.
amazing landscape photography. And I think Utah is probably one of those places that you can get such a really interesting variety. I mean, I know a good deal of it is desert,
Mhm.
but it's like not every desert's built the same. Like the arch, for
Right.
example, that's pictured here is one of the really interesting ones
It's incredible.
that's just really interesting. You get sandstone and the wind
Mhm.
that blows through it and creates that. And then you have the snowy mountains and the wooded areas. Talk to me a little bit about the general geography of the area and what really struck you about it.
Well, the first thing that strikes you is the Wasatch Mountains, which all the population of Utah, and I think we're going to talk about that, really lines up with the Wasatch Mountains. But that's the draw. The snow in Utah is absolutely incredible. It's pure powder. Back in the day when I was skiing, I don't anymore because knees, but and age, but
Yeah.
when they say it's the best snow on earth, I'm not going to argue. It's all pure powder, and that's why a lot of people go there. And it was a natural choice for the 2002 Olympics as well. So that is, the mountains are incredible, and the skiing and the snow, that's their main draw. But then you have all the national parks like Zion and Bryce and Arches National Park, which you've got the picture of there.
Mhm.
Um, I love the town of Moab, which is just outside of Arches, and I had never been until just like 2 weekends before I left to move to Oregon, and I decided I've got to go. So I went down. Yeah, and it was stunning. I mean, I literally sat there with my camera for probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, just oohing and awing, because it is really incredible to see. It's something people shouldn't miss.
And obviously, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, you got a beautiful view of the stars at night, and everything
Oh,
is just spectacular. Now, the states that border Utah, I believe you have Idaho to the north, you have Wyoming to the
Wyoming
east and the north
and
also.
north. Hmm.
You have Colorado to the east,
Yep,
you have Nevada to the west,
yep,
and then you have Arizona to the south.
yep,
And Arizona is another one that has a huge Mormon community, and especially in the Scottsdale area as
yep.
well. But
And
um,
so does Idaho. So does Idaho.
oh, okay, cool. And then in terms of the weather, now you and I were having a chat about this because most states usually have some kind of extreme weather phenomenon or some major natural disaster that's associated with weather. But for the most part, Utah is pretty much free of that, I think. Would you agree on that?
It is. It is. I mean, the only thing they might have is a huge snowfall, which of course would affect getting down from, Park City and mountain communities. But as far as like Salt Lake, even if they have a massive snowfall, they look out the window and go, "Time for the snow blower," and then they just they just clear it away. It's like it's another day in Utah. So yeah, there really aren't any like major calamities as far as, weather or natural disasters occur.
But the seasons are very prominent there, as you were making mention.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
definitely a very prominent summer, and there's definitely a very prominent winter there.
Yeah, it's really two seasons. You get really warm summers. I mean, very hot and dry. With a little bit of moisture. I mean, it's not dry like Nevada or Arizona, but you get a little bit of moisture, but very, very, very hot, very dry. Can get into the hundreds or 90s for weeks on end. And then winter hits and it starts snowing. And it's like, whoa, okay. I had the air conditioner on, and now I'm going to throw a log in the fire. It's really interesting, and just two seasons, and that's it. Well, actually, I, I'm incorrect. There is a third season, and it's called construction. So yeah, that's an old Utah joke. Yeah, the old Utah joke actually is, or Salt Lake City joke, I should say, is there are two seasons in Salt Lake City: winter and construction.
Yes. Question for you. I don't know that we didn't discuss this initially, but I was wondering if you had any insight as to why there is a huge salt lake in the middle of the state as opposed to other states that might have freshwater lakes.
um, Unknown. Unknown by me, actually.
Okay.
It is massive, the Great Salt Lake. It is sort of attached to the Bonneville Salt Flats. So, I mean,
Mm,
at one time it was underwater. It was part of the ocean, and for some reason these phenomenons just stayed. At one time there was a law on the books. I teach my when I was teaching. Actually, I even here. I teach my business law students that And I don't know if they've removed it, but it is illegal to shoot a whale from a moving car.
Wait, what?
I,
In Utah?
I it used to be a law. Uh, I don't know what to tell you. The Great Salt Lake does not have whales, so just telling you that. But yeah, fun stuff.
I know in one of the states in the South, it's illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket.
Yeah, yeah. There's some really weird laws out there, and they're fantastic. They're a riot to read.
Crazy. Now, let's talk about some of my favorite things, which is the culture of the area. Now, one of the things that is very prominent, and we've already alluded to this, is the focus on religion in the state of Utah. Um, Huge LDS presence, and for those who are not familiar, that's Latter-day Saints, and that's the Mormon faith, and they are huge. In fact, the picture I have up here is from the Mormon temple, which is in Salt Lake City, but it's actually not even open right now, correct?
Correct. The temple has been shut down for 4 years for complete renovation,
Mhm.
um, which I actually just found out by accident myself. They're completely renovating it, but it's something. Even though it's a religious place, you can't go into the temple. Nobody can go into the temple, but there are many buildings on the temple grounds, including where the Mormon Tabernacle Choir sings.
Mm.
And put religion aside, nobody's going to harass you. Nobody's going to come up to you and say, hey, you want to become a Mormon? Nobody does that. It's a beautiful place, and I really highly encourage people to go see it. It's incredible. And I am not LDS myself. Excuse me. But it is a beautiful set of buildings. It's very interesting to learn about the religion and the culture. And if you get the chance to see the Mormon Tabernacle Choir singing in their home building, it's absolutely breathtaking.
Excellent. And that leads us into arts, because obviously the Mormon Tabernacle Choir is one of the most world-renowned choirs. But then, not to set aside the other piece, the other art establishments that you have, tons of museums, tons of live theater in, especially in
Loads
Salt
of that.
Lake.
Mhm.
Yeah, excellent. As far as language goes, obviously English being the primary language in Utah, but you also have a smattering of Spanish and then some native tongues as well.
Yeah, there are lots of little indigenous languages throughout, but they're mostly spoken at home. And that comes from the missionary work that the LDS Church does, and then converts tend to sometimes move to the Salt Lake area. So you do get some indigenous languages here and there. Every once in a while, you'll hear people speaking a foreign language, and in residents, but they all speak English as well. So
Mhm.
English is really the language.
Okay. And let's get into the topic of food, because with Utah, it's a little bit different than most other states. And some of it's down home cooking, other things are a little bit more locally influenced. Talk to me about some of the more prominent things that you remember in terms of the unique experiences for cuisine in the state of Utah.
Green Jello.
Green Jello.
I'm not a Jello fan to begin with. Won't touch green Jello. I don't know why it's a thing. It just is, and everybody jokes about it. It's the green Jello joke. The other thing that I always remember are funeral potatoes. Funeral potatoes are something that, and they're called that because it's a dish that when somebody passes, other people usually typically will make and bring to the house. They're fantastic. They're kind of like a potatoes au gratin dish, if you can think of that. But they're fantastic. They're really yummy. So you don't just have to have them at a funeral.
I wonder if that's where they
Um,
get the term, like bringing a casserole to a funeral or something like
oh
that.
yeah. Oh, that is one thing I will say about the people that are in the LDS Church is they're very, very giving, and they're very loving towards people. My father's wife just recently passed away, and everybody was coming over to even during COVID, they would stand at the door and just wish him well, and say how sorry they were, and just really lovely people. That's one thing I will 100% say about Utah is they're nice, they're good people.
Excellent. Couple of other food things that come to mind from there.
Fry
Fry
sauce.
sauce, fry
Fry
sauce, sauce. Talk to me about
sauce.
fry sauce.
I love fry sauce. I'm a believer. I am a convert to fry sauce. Fry sauce is great. They serve it in every restaurant. You can get it in the market too and bring it home. It's really like a combination of like Thousand Island and mayo, something like that. But it's terrific. It's really good. Not difficult to make. You can probably get a simple recipe online, but I highly recommend fry sauce with everything.
And then you'll also notice when a visitor goes to the state that a lot of the sheriff's badges, even the state seal has a has like a beehive on it, and honey appears to be like a major production factor in the state of Utah as well.
It is. There's another reason for that, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, they do produce a lot of honey, a lot of honeybees. Um, so yeah, honey is also a major production there. They're really more known for the Mormon foods, the foods of the LDS Church, than anything else. But yeah, they're really good restaurants there, and especially downtown Salt Lake. Like I said, terrific restaurants. It's not a food destination, but they do have good food.
Okay. And the picture I have on the screen here, which looks like some kind of bread covered in sauce, that is a scone. Uh,
A Utah scone, which I had actually never had, and I'm going to have to call my mother-in-law and ask her why I've never had that. We're going to have a conversation. But it's like an Indian fry bread, deep fried, donutty, not sweet, but yeah, I can't really explain it. They call it a Utah scone, but apparently they do it either sweet or savory.
mhm,
So you can do, I mean, it looks like this one has butter on it or
mhm.
gravy of some sort, but they typically put butter or, even raspberries and, cream and things like that. So I think it emanated from the significant First Nation people that still live in the whole Utah area.
Mhm.
Um, I think it really, the Native Americans, I think it really emanates from that fry bread.
Okay. And then as we move on to recreation and sports, obviously the Utah Grizzlies, Utah Jazz, there's a soccer team there that's pretty prominent too.
Yes, the Salt Lake Real,
Salt
very
Lake Rio.
prominent team. But more than anything with sports and recreation, skiing and snowboarding.
Mhm.
It's just some of the best skiers and snowboarders. I'm talking about like our Olympic level athletes, either are from the Utah area along the Wasatch, or they go there to train because it's just world renowned. I mean, you get people from all sorts of countries that go to the Olympics that live in Salt Lake to train.
Excellent. And then this state actually does have a state holiday that is pretty well known. Talk to me about that.
Pioneer Day.
Mhm.
I think it's the 24th. It's the end of July.
Okay.
Um, it's a it's
I know what you're going to say.
it's also known as Founders Day. It's the day that Brigham Young and the rest of the wagon train arrived, and he said, "This is the place." That's where it comes from, and it's a state holiday. Everything shuts down. They do fireworks and family picnics and what have you. But non-Mormons call it Pioneer Day
Yep.
instead of Pioneer Day. So non-Mormons use it as an excuse to just have a holiday
Mhm.
and eat pie and drink beer. So
And it is one of those days that that's the entire state pretty much gets off from work.
yes,
So, yeah.
yeah, it's a state holiday. The whole state closes down on Pioneer Day.
Yep. Absolutely. So let's let's talk about the population, because if you look at this map, you'd be like, wow, it's pretty localized to just one little area.
It is. It is. It's very much that area where you see the red, the higher population.
Mhm.
That's all along the Wasatch Mountains.
Okay.
So Utah Valley, where Provo and Orem are. Um,
Ogden.
North would be Salt Lake City. Then north of that would be Ogden, Ogden and Logan. Those are the main areas, and they're all centrally located along the Wasatch Mountains because that's where the resources are. The rest of the city is very rural, more desert-like, and you got farms and a lot of ranches. You get a
Yeah.
lot of ranches in the desert, more deserty areas. So yeah, it's the population is heavy in that corridor.
And while I know a lot of, they do still produce raspberries and they still do produce
Mhm.
corn a lot in the area, but it seems like cattle farms and the like are
Right.
the big thing, the big draw in Utah, it seems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as far as the economy, this I found really fascinating because I'm normally, when I look at states, normally these large companies pop out to me like a Walmart or an Amazon or something like that. And, or, it just surprises me that in this state, it's pretty much either the schools or the church or medical facilities that really are the largest institutions within the state.
The church owns a lot, let's say that. But it's also become like Oregon is the Silicon Forest. They're becoming the Silicon Desert,
Mhm.
if you will. A lot of companies have opened up there. The NSA has a huge facility there, and it's because the everything's the people. I should say the people. The employment is cheap. It's the wages are a lot less in Utah than they are in other states. People work for less. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I don't know. It's a good thing for business. It's a bad thing for people, but that's the state of the state of the union there. So yeah, one of the things I do want to say about business, the Latter-day Saints and the temple, they own a lot. They really do. But one of the fun things for your listeners, if any of you are into genealogy,
Mm,
there is in Salt Lake City, part of the church, there is a genealogy library. It's just outside of the temple grounds, and it's open to absolutely anyone. And it's I don't know, 5 to 7 floors of genealogical information on everything and everywhere in the world. So if you really, I'm sure your listeners have heard of Ancestry.com and
absolutely. Yeah.
Family Search. Well, Family Search is owned by the LDS Church, not Ancestry is not. But anybody can go there, and they welcome you with open arms. If you need help, there are research helpers. Religion is not discussed. It's not an issue. This is just genealogy research, and it's really a fascinating place. I've spent entire days there getting lost in information, going down
Gotta,
rabbit holes.
yeah, well, I can imagine a lot of the research material that you can get there is just
If it
like gold
exists,
mine.
they
Yeah,
have it.
yeah,
If it exists, they have it. Yeah.
fantastic. What about the travel and transportation in the state? How well regulated is that?
Cars.
Okay, so
That's it. Cars. Within Salt Lake City, there is a light rail, but it only goes to a few points outside into the suburbs where there's a greater population. And then of course within the city, but it's very, and the city is small. The city is very, very small, but it really doesn't go enough places to make it, valuable for tourists.
yeah,
So cars, basically.
okay, but like even if you were going into the general area there, like if you were flying into Salt Lake, there's you probably have to be there for a reason because the airport itself, up to recent, has not really been that huge, not large wise speaking.
No, it's always been a very small, really basically one terminal. Well, two terminals, but it's really one building. Airport. But they just completed, I think the other day, if I'm not mistaken, they just opened a new terminal, and it's huge. So I
Hmm.
have not seen it. I've not been inside, but my stepbrother is a pilot. Based out of Salt Lake City, and he said that it's magnificent. So they've really done a good job. Um, they're growing. They're definitely growing. Skiing is a major draw for people from all over the world. So, you know,
Excellent. Now, in terms of the government, now this is an interesting dichotomy here because you have a very conservative state that is primarily red. All their representatives, are conservative. They are Republican for the most part. But then you get into Salt Lake City, and that is decisively blue, it seems like.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's very, very liberal in Salt Lake City itself, and which is really interesting. And a lot of and I'll tell you, when I got married and we had a ceremony in our backyard, um, and well, actually, which I want to go back to when I got married, and the house that I had was part of or located at where the old stables for the church were back
Yeah.
in the hundreds. And in my backyard, we found an old horseshoe. It's brought me a lot of luck, and I bring it with me everywhere I go. Every house I go to. But Salt Lake City itself has become very Democrat. There's a Democrat mayor, and has been for many, many years. There's several. There's actually there used to be a lesbian mayor.
Mhm,
There is a gay state senator,
mhm.
Jim DeBacchus, who's been part of the Senate for a very long time. It's very liberal in Salt Lake City. So when my friends got the invite to come to the wedding, a lot of them were thinking, "Oh, do I really want to go to Utah?" And when they got there and they spent some time in Salt Lake City, they were quite surprised how different it was definitely different than their expectations.
Well, and you take a look at the population size of Utah, you're looking at something like 3 million people or
Right.
close to 3 million people. And if Salt Lake City on its own is close to a million or maybe even above that, then
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's a significant amount to say, okay, well, yeah, there's going to be there's a lot of influence that even those who are hardcore right right of center would not be able to squelch because it continues to grow and foster in
Exactly.
that area. So
And I'll tell you where the growth came from was Park City. Park City is in the mountains above Salt Lake City, for those that don't know the geography. And Park City is a major draw for, I mean, you've got the Sundance Film Festival that
mm,
takes place there in every February. Well, usually every February,
well,
maybe
yeah,
not this
COVID.
February. But and a lot of skiing and wealthy homes. A lot of people have winter homes up there because of the skiing. That's where my stepbrother lives, up in Park City. And because of that, Park City is really like a different world. It's really interesting. And that trickled down into Salt Lake and started making Salt Lake a little more liberal until it became very, very liberal. In fact, funny fact, there are more lesbian and gay couples living in Salt Lake than any other city in the country.
Yeah, from a family oriented
Yeah.
perspective, the even the Mormon church is very in favor of families. And so this is just, we've started to see even a little bit more tolerance and acceptance of the LGBT community more so than it had been in the past.
Well, yeah, and here's the interesting thing: the official line, the official word is no.
Yeah.
You don't accept. Um, the reality, families are accepting because they're realizing, hey, it's the 21st century. Family is important. I'm not giving up my child. So yeah, I mean, me, for example, with my partner, or my wife, I should say, um, our in-laws are fantastic. Love the whole family, and they're devout Mormons, but they just adore them, and they're
Excellent.
very accepting. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
And then we talk about the resources in the state. Obviously, coal is a huge thing, draw there, oil, um, natural gas. I've even heard I think it's plutonium that is in the area as well.
Oh, dear.
Yeah,
Copper.
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 Copper is another thing.
Yeah, the Kennecott copper mine is huge, and it's been around for a very long time. Big employer, and it is in the Salt Lake Valley. It's far west, the far west end of the valley. Yeah, it's a huge mine.
And in old times, obviously, salt was a big,
Salt,
thing
yes,
in that area
absolutely.
too.
Yeah,
Obviously,
The Great Salt Lake.
Great Salt Lake. And then obviously you have, like, as I may mentioned to you earlier, a lot of uh, the cash crops are things like raspberries, corn, cattle.
Yeah.
You have that in there as far as a resource there.
Oh, I do
Oh, sure.
before we talk. No, it's fine. It's fine. Before we talk about education, I just want to mention, back to traveling and seeing things
Mhm.
in the Utah area. You'd be amazed at how big the Salt Lake is, the Great Salt Lake is. It's worth a trip there. It's not that far out of Salt Lake City, but you'll see buffalo roaming. You'll get a little bit of taste. They have some, little old fashioned, settlers cities, and they put on some performances. It's
Oh, cool.
really fun, but it's amazing to see the wild buffalo, tons of wild buffalo.
That's awesome. I
Or
like that actually.
bison, sorry, bison.
Bison, sorry. I see those on Catalina Island when I go there from time to time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, on Catalina, they were flown there, but there's tons of them in the Salt Lake area. I mean, sorry, by the Great Salt Lake.
excellent.
It's called
Now,
Antelope Valley.
Antelope,
Sorry, Antelope Island.
Antelope Island. Okay.
Yeah, Antelope Island.
Okay. And then in terms of education, lots of really renowned schools. Brigham Young, obviously a huge one. University of Utah,
Yeah.
Utah State. So at the college level, it's definitely prominent. In terms of education for those K through 12, it seems like there's a little bit of a mixed bag there. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
There is a bit of a mixed bag. My stepdaughter, my youngest stepdaughter, is still in, excuse me, in high school there, and she's getting a very good education. She's part of a gifted program, and so they do have very good gifted programs and what have you. But literacy is important in Utah, but higher education is not, especially for women. The LDS church is not, I mean, they're not against it, but it's just not, it's not,
The priority?
it's not a priority, right? A lot of times the priority is, if you're going to go to college, you should go to BYU and find a husband. That's just culture. That's in the culture. But they do have very good schools. BYU is a very good school. University of Utah, great school. We used to live just below it. Used to, sell parking spots in our driveway for the football games. And my other stepdaughter goes to Utah Valley University, which is another one. And so the schools are good. They're very good. The literacy rate is high, but the schools themselves, K through 12, is kind of a mixed bag.
And for my LDS followers that are out there, for my students, if you have a differing opinion on this, by all means, please let me know in the comments. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that as well. Okay. Moving on to safety and security, probably one of the safest states to be in general. It seems the people are polite for the most part, from what I hear. I don't hear too many stories about random roving Mormon gangs or anything like that. So it's not really high up on there. As far as foreign and domestic terrorism, nothing I've really heard of that stands out. So
it's really a pretty calm city as far as all of that goes. And that's not to say that activists don't protest things and what have you, but it's very calm. It's just pretty easygoing. It's pretty laid back as far as any that goes.
Okay, so on the onset, or on the outside, I should say, give me a quick elevator speech. Why do I want to go to Utah? Sell me on it.
National parks, skiing, the outdoorsy things are really a draw. Even if you're not a hiker, excuse me, even if you're not a hiker, seeing Zion, seeing Bryce, seeing the arches, going up to Park City. All things you can do, even if you're not a person that hikes, or not an outdoorsy person. Still lots to see, and it's really, I can't say enough about people going there for the outdoor experience. And then of course Salt Lake City it can be a fun city, and go and see the LDS temple, because it's just, the grounds are gorgeous. It's something not to miss.
That is one thing I do want to point out really quick to my students as well. When I travel the world, I mean, I am not the most religious person. I'm a spiritual person, but I don't think of myself as a overly religious person. I travel to a lot of spiritual sites, whether it's churches, cathedrals, temples, whatever the case may be, because again, you can appreciate the art, you can appreciate the beauty of it, you can appreciate the history of it. That's another thing too. It's really quite fascinating to be able to go to all these places that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's definitely a really important draw, and I wouldn't necessarily cross something like that off your list because maybe you have an aversion to religion when in fact you might come away with, wow, that was real. My previous conceptions of this were actually really off.
I mean, personally, I have an aversion to religion as far as practicing, but I love seeing religions all over the world, and visiting artifacts and learning about them and speaking to the people. I think it's fascinating, and it's one of the things I love when I travel. So yeah, absolutely. Don't go to Utah, don't go to Salt Lake City and miss those things, because that's really it's really a part of the place, and it's interesting to see and meet
Absolutely.
the people.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be part of the culture. It's in the environment. It's ingrained in who they are.
Yeah.
Don't deprive yourself of this opportunity to just enjoy, going out there, seeing things, meeting people, and just don't take one aspect out of it because it's going to, in my opinion, diminish the experience.
Absolutely, and no one's gonna shove it down anyone's throat. The entire time I lived there, I never had anyone proselytize or try and shove it down my throat. Even if I had, the occasional young Mormon men knocking on my door, I would say, "That's not me." And, "Oh, sorry," and they leave. It's nothing to be afraid of. Nothing to get worried about. They're lovely people, and it really is something that people should experience. I think it's the architecture of the temple grounds are just
Mm.
amazing. It's just, you could spend hours there.
And you probably will if you're doing a lot of your own genealogical research. So
Oh, but yeah, there and on the temple grounds themselves, just looking at the buildings, and if you're fortunate enough to hear the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, it's just awe-inspiring. It doesn't matter. They could be singing the telephone book. It doesn't matter. It's really something to hear in person.
well, I want to thank you again, Morissa. You are always very generous with your time and your knowledge. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on Utah with us. It really is appreciated. In fact, if people wanted to go see more of your stuff, especially the wonderful photography that you do, they can go visit you on Facebook. I know that you have a website, which is at www.fredericophotography.com, all one word. And on Instagram, you can be found at Frederico Photography. Is that correct as well?
That is correct.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much, Morissa. We look forward to hearing from you again sometime very, very soon. Hopefully, we'll be able to travel internationally soon as well. And again, yep, I appreciate it. For my students that are out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can certainly send them to me at scott@theprofessortravel.com. If you're on YouTube right now and you want to be notified when new videos come up, hit the bell icon right above us in order to be notified about those. If you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe. We definitely appreciate you as being part of the community. If you like this content and you would like to receive more of it, give us a thumbs up. We really appreciate that. And then finally, if you're on the podcast and you haven't already done so, please give us a rating. We really do appreciate it. It helps us to grow as a community. But until next time, make every day a travel adventure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.